You found Paranormal M for a reason. Something in you wants to know the truth, the uncomfortable, the unexplainable, the terrifying truth. Subscribe now. Fear isn't just a feeling. It's real, and it's here. Visitation or nightmare. So, back in 1998, I was an army chef serving in Antrim, Northern Ireland. Among the soldiers on camp, we had a visiting, I don't know what this word is, but cadre of military policemen, about 15 of them. Being a chef, as you can imagine, you get to meet pretty much everybody. So over the days of their visit, I got pretty friendly with them. As they were temporarily based at our barracks, they were housed at the Tenko huts, as we call them. Basically, old wooden huts, I think 10 or 12, in what was one long room with bed spaces on either side. One evening, I went to the camp NAAFI, which is like a small convenience store and bar for soldiers, and joined the queue with about 6 of the policemen. That was when I noticed one of the guys looked rough, like ashen pale, with big dark bags under his eyes. His mates were all talking the piss out of him. Curious, asked him what was wrong, and what he said next, well, it's always stuck with me. He explained in the early hours of the morning he was woken by the sounds of somebody walking into the room. He said he lay in bed listening to the footsteps, but as his locker blocked the view, he couldn't see who it was. The footsteps slowly carried on, walking down the room toward his bed space, until finally he saw the footsteps belonged to an old man. He was bald, but with gray hair at the sides, wearing a red and blue lumberjack bomber jacket. Was walking with his mouth wide open. He said the old man walked to the end of his bed and then turned toward him, and that's when he suddenly noticed his hands had fingers that were unnaturally long, like a foot in length. He said the man reached out with both hands as if to grab him. He tried to move, but he said he was literally paralyzed, couldn't move a muscle. While he was telling me this story, his mates were all laughing. Apparently, he had woken them up all by screaming. But it was when he described the old man, hair stood up on my body, even recalling this now. The thing is I recognized the man from his description. One of the civilians who washed pots and pans in the kitchen was a grumpy old man from Liverpool. A few months prior, he had sadly collapsed walking home just outside the camp, had died to a heart attack. He always wore red and blue lumberjack padded jackets. When they tried to resuscitate him, they discovered he had stolen a big block of cheddar from the kitchens. It's always stuck with me. Like he was a cankerous old git, but harmless. I hate the thought of him somehow stuck in limbo. But maybe it was just a coincidence and was a vivid nightmare. What do you think? My weird firefighter experience. I've been a firefighter for about 9 years now in Northwest Virginia. I've often heard stories about fire stations being haunted, and I even have had some strange experiences myself at my own station, and on a few incidents. My favorite example of something I can't explain is on the scene of a fatal hit-and-run involving a pedestrian. It happened in December of 2016. My department was responding to a chimney fire when we were toned again. For a vehicle versus pedestrian. That doesn't sound like a fair fight. We were on scene of a fire and had to put the next due engine on the vehicle versus pedestrian call. About an hour later, around 10:30 p.m., after we finished cleaning our equipment from the fire, we were dispatched to assist the Virginia State Police with their investigation by providing light to their scene. When we arrived on scene, we noticed that there was police tape everywhere. I got out of the engine and illuminated the scene to find a black sheet, obviously covering a body. There were 11 police officers walking around, and some behind the tape talking to the potential witnesses, and others walking around inside the tape gathering items to start their investigation. Among the officers inside the tape, I noticed a Caucasian lady, or a white lady, about 5'4" and wearing dark blue jeans, a white shirt, and a thick brown stripe and greenish coat. She looked concerned and very out of place, but she was near some of the officers, so I thought obviously she had permission to be there. I turned around to start sort of recirculating the tank water due to the extreme cold. Got back in the engine shortly after, and occasionally I'd look up from my phone to see what the officers were doing for their investigation, then swiftly look back at my phone. After about 10 minutes or so, I got out of the recirculate, and just as I got out of the engine, an officer uncovered the body. The body was of a Caucasian woman, wearing dark blue jeans, a white top, and thick brown stripes, and a greenish coat. I instantly realized that she was wearing the same clothes as the lady I'd previously seen walking around the body. I stood there frozen like a minute. I composed myself, scanned the rest of the scene, and attempted to spot the lady wearing the same clothes and walking around. After a few frigid minutes of looking, I got back to the engine and I waited until the investigation was finished. Couldn't find a way to tell the other person in the engine without sounding crazy, so I kept to myself. I really wish I could find a logical way to explain this. Still gives me chills when I think about it. The concerned look on the woman's face is something that I will never have leaving my mind. Here is my audio evidence with the famous Thomas House Hotel Whistler. I have a physics degree, and I'm very skeptical of stuff to begin with. But I've always been extremely fascinated by this stuff. Had some experiences with the Ouija board when I was 14 to 20, but still nothing that makes me 100% believe. Backstory. I have been to this hotel 6 times. And 2 of the times, we have had some interesting stuff happen, and the other 4 times we've caught absolutely nothing. First time there, we caught very little in the ways of evidence and ghost hunting. But about 10 minutes after we arrived, my wife thought a kid tugged on her shirt in the kitchen as we were mingling with the other guests. She mentioned it, but chalked it up to not much of anything. Later that night when we went to bed, I would have sworn to you, a small dog or cat jumped in bed with us. Happened 3 times. The first 2 times I thought it was just my imagination or the weight of the blankets. But when I pulled the blankets tight between my feet and the pressure sat down between my feet, I then got up and walked around the room and went to the bathroom. Anyway, still not convinced. Now, fast forward to a year later. First time was in December as well. We're in the green hallway, and the room is absolutely popping off with sounds and whistles, and in the video you'll hear 3 instances of the whistles that we heard, at least with our ears in the moment. In the last one, no one heard, but showed up on the recording after the fact. When it happened, and especially an extremely loud and clear one, I was convinced somebody was faking it or messing with us, and you'll hear me pretty much saying that. Even afterwards, I still didn't believe it, but ironically, only 3 of us in the group of 10-ish heard the extremely loud and clear whistle. It wasn't until that night when the guest who I was sure played a recording came up to me and told me he caught the whistle in his recorder that I kind of thought maybe we had caught something strange. When he played his back to me, his was even louder and more clear than mine, but still was clearly not coming from him because in my recording you can hear my whistle and loud and obvious. It's a real person. Anyway, take this for what you want. If you believe, fine. If you don't, fine. And I just hope somebody else finds this interesting. Enjoys it for a few minutes this morning. Still not 100% convinced in ghosts, but I am 100% fascinated by it. I can't guarantee the hotel or hosts aren't faking the evidence, but if they are faking it, they're doing it very sporadically, and, if ever caught, would likely harm the hotel and business by a lot, as it's the main source of guests that, well, these days at least. Fishing ghost. 3 days ago, I was out fishing. I started fishing around 4 in the afternoon that day from shore, and probably around 9:30 p.m. decided I was going to move spots. That's because I wanted to try for a catfish along a channel. I drive to the new spot while talking on the phone to my friend, and the fishing spot is pretty regularly used by people, and as an unofficial boat launch. Within view of my childhood home where my mom still lives, the spot isn't lit up except by a street light about a block and a half away. As I'm pulling up my headlights, shine in the dark shape of a person right by the water. I pause because I don't want to fish next to a stranger in the dark in the middle of nowhere. But when I look again, the shape wasn't there, so I figured it was my eyes, and maybe I was just having this weird thing as I was driving in. I get off the phone with my friend and get myself set up by the shore, centrally where I thought I'd seen the person standing because that was the best spot to get set up with my chair. I sit alone in the dark for about an hour or so, and at one point I turned on my flashlight to toss my line in a different spot. It's a cloudless night, so I can see stars, but there isn't a moon at all, so it's really quite dark. The one street comes nowhere near to illuminating this spot, nowhere close to it actually. I have my flashlight on and get myself seated in my chair before turning it back off. I sit there in the dark for a few minutes as my eyes adjust. Again, I realize that directly across the channel, about 20 feet, I can see my shadow in my camping chair. And about 6 feet to the right of my shadow, I see another shadow-shaped person facing me. Thinking that maybe it's just some really dark, conveniently shaped foliage across the water, I turn my light on only to see nothing. The grasses are the same, no bushes, and I turn my light off and I see it's still there. I move around a bit with the light off to confirm my shadow hasn't doubled for some or other unseen light source, and I see my shadow move, but not the other one. I get up and over the course of 5 minutes move around, turning the light on and off around my shore, from behind my chair and around the sides and behind my car. I was parked about 50 feet from shore. I couldn't make that extra shadow change position or shape, and I decide I'm going to sit back down and ignore it because I don't have time for foolishness sometimes. I sit down in my chair and I turn off the light. I realize that now the shadow has moved closer by about 3 feet and changed shape to be more identifiable as a person. But I turn to the side as if it's standing next to me and looking at me. It was at that point I decided that I wasn't turning the light off and it was time to go home. Thought about taking a picture or trying to find or something, but figured even if the night shot on my phone, it wouldn't turn out. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see what might show up. A little background about the area. Not entirely related to the story, but within a 2-mile radius are 2 separate Native American burial grounds on the same body of water I was fishing. And archaeologists have found Native American and fur trade era artifacts all over the area, as well as in the yard of my childhood home, which was within eyesight of where I was. About half a mile away, also within sight, is an old and quite haunted tuberculosis hospital. Also, my childhood home was quite haunted, with things getting moved and voices and apparitions that were built and owned by the tuberculosis hospital, and over the course of time used by nurses, the hospital cook, and when the hospital was bought by priests as a cemetery. Seminary. The house was lived in by some of the priests who were teaching, and there was supposedly a tunnel system leading from my old house to the hospital and another hospital building. I think the tunnel was located in the woods behind her house, as I found concrete slabs that looked like they would have been used for a tunnel. But the tunnel was filled in long ago. Heard somebody calling me in the late hours. I was 18 at the time. Summer, in the middle of the night, about 1 a.m. I lived in a 3-story house. It's still somewhat in construction to this day, by the way. And I was with my family, in our room being on the 2nd floor. Our housekeeper also slept in this one makeshift bedroom for her near up the stairs on the 3rd floor. It's where she could see everything by the entrance to the house. Most of the time, she calls off the dogs that we had if they were being too rowdy downstairs. Sometimes she would go down there herself late in the hours when needed. Anyways, the stairs leading down was on the opposite side to where she slept at the time. And if you would go outside her bedroom door, the stars would be on the left side, while our housekeeper would be on the right. Our internet modem was placed outside our room, a straight shot forward from our bedroom door. And at night, I made it a habit to turn it off. Both me and my brother shared the room, tended to sleep really late, so we would end up being the last people to be awake in the house. I volunteered to go outside and turn off the modem. I stepped outside, shut the door behind me, turned on the lights in the process to see where I was going. Everything seemed fine. The dogs are pretty quiet, and I can see our housekeeper sleeping comfortably in her bed. Other than the sounds of random cars passing by and my dog having itchy ears for some reason, it was completely silent. I made it to the modem and shut the thing off. And right before I turned around, I could hear a faint but audible shh. I don't know why, but something inside me told me that it wasn't our housekeeper. Not only did the sound come from my left, where the stairs leading down would be, but it just didn't sound right. It wasn't the kind of shh meant to silence someone. More like a person calling out to you to get your attention, to make you look to whatever had made the call. Needless to say, I didn't look. I turned around and sprinted for the door to her bedroom. The looming sense of dread somehow building up so much in me, even though the door was only 4 or 5 steps away. Once I got in, my brother asked me if I was okay. I told him all about it, in a joking and obnoxious manner even. But in reality, I was scared. Nothing else happened after that, and I find it ironic, honestly. My folks have a long history of hauntings, especially my mother, which I might share here too if you guys want. But this was my first and currently only real-life spooks that has basically happened to me. I don't know if I should be relieved or disappointed, but either way, I definitely do not want to get shushed at again anytime soon. I, too, hate being shushed. I feel ya. Demonic cult orbs of light, demonic spirits, old cemetery. When I was 18 years old, in the summer of 2009, me and a friend decided to visit a cemetery in our area at night. It was connected to a park with a trail and woods behind it. The cemetery was old, like early 1800s old. My friend and I drove up to the trail parking lot. We got out of his car and walked down the dark lane surrounded by dark trees and shadows. As we were walking closer to the cemetery, I started getting nervous for some reason. We got to the cemetery in the middle of the woods, and I started getting this bad feeling like we were being watched. We kept getting closer to the back of the cemetery. And once we were in the middle, I noticed orbs of light in the woodland toward the back of the cemetery. There was at least 50+ orbs, too many to count really. We got closer, and they got brighter, and the feeling in my stomach got worse. I stopped and whispered to my friend if he was seeing the same thing I was seeing. He confirmed the same thing. We inched a little closer toward the back of the cemetery, and I got this terrible feeling inside me. Like it was evil, and that I should not get closer to these orbs. I said that I think we should go back, and he agreed, and I just knew it was something that we should stay away from. So we started walking back quietly, and we made it back to the dark grass lane in the woods which led to the parking lot in the middle of nowhere. As we were walking about halfway down the lane, I heard a twig snap. Thought it was just an animal, so I kept going at my normal pace, and all of a sudden we heard a crash in the woods followed by footsteps that quickened the pace running towards us. We started sprinting down the lane to my friend's car in the parking lot. We get to the opening, the parking lot just outside the woods. We practically dove into his car, and he's starting his car up, and I see a hooded figure. I assume it was a man, and it had a large knife in his hand reflecting moonlight off of it. He stopped at the edge of the woods, staring at us. My friend sped out of there as fast as he could, and later, one of my other friends I worked with was leaving a company kickball league match at around maybe 15 minutes away in the same county. It was also at night, and he ended up talking to another one of his friends after the game. They ended up being the last two people still at the park. My friend said he saw a man in a dark hood like the one I described, standing underneath a massive old footbridge that was at the east end of the park, approximately 200 meters from him. It was no longer in service, and it was falling apart with signs around it warning of falling debris. He started running at the two guys, and my friend noticed he had a knife. He told his friend, and they both sprinted to their cars and got out of there, and apparently the hooded man got really close to my friend's car and hit it with his hands before he could get away. My friend said that they went back to the park and they found a dead cat underneath the bridge. It might have been hanging or laying there with its throat slashed, but I can't recall the details. I'd also learned of individual's name that was chasing us, and he had gone to the same high school as me, but was several years older than me. Apparently, he was in a demonic cult. I had heard from numerous other people from the same county. They say that there was a local cult with the same description. They were meeting in abandoned factories and warehouses and buildings in secluded places around the area of the county I lived in. I was also told that they would find dead cats and other animals at these other locations, which seems to be demonic, but I'm no expert on that topic. Also just seems regular sick, but regardless, what's your opinion on what this cult group was doing, and what do you think the orbs of light near the cemetery where the cult was meeting were? I honestly have never seen anything like this in my life. And I did research, which isn't reliable, and there was a few places that said the orbs of light could represent spirits or demonic spirit portals. I honestly have no idea other than that they were evil spirits and that I should not get any closer to them. Friendly visitor. Back in 2009, I was 26 years old and I lived by myself on the second floor of a multifamily house. The entrance door to the apartment was a double door made of clear glass. It led straight to the living room, so someone standing at the door would pretty much see the whole layout of the house since it was a studio-like place. It's where the living room and kitchen were in an open concept, and you could see the door, a real wood one, that led to my room. It was really weird at first, but it grew on me and I ended up liking it. To ensure privacy, I installed heavy curtains on the inside of it, but I'd always leave them open during the day because it would help with the lighting. I never had issues with it, at least not with the living, but throughout the whole time I lived there. But one day, something really creepy happened. Something I never wrapped my head around to this day. That day, me and my boyfriend at the time had just started dating. We were going to go to the movies, so he called me and told me what time he'd pick me up and headed to the shower. The bathroom was inside my bedroom to get ready. I left my bedroom door open because even though the curtains from the main entrance were open, you couldn't see inside the bathroom. It's just a door. So I showered, started getting dressed, when I suddenly realized the time he said would stop by came and went. Thought he was just a little late, so I called him to see if he was on his way. When he answered, I asked him if he was coming, and he was super confused. He told me he had gone to pick me up, but when he got to the door, he saw I had a visitor, so he left and was going to give me a call later. I told him nobody'd been at the house, and I ran to check the door, locks, and everything. Asked if he would come over to the house again. Everything was locked, windows, front door, and everything. When he got there, his face was white as paper, and he was black, and proceeded to tell me what he saw. He said that when he got to the front glass door, my curtains were open as usual, and he saw a black man dressed in light jeans and a white buttoned shirt in my living room. The man was right in front of the bedroom door, which was open like I mentioned. And he was looking toward it, talking and smiling and laughing like he was having a conversation with me. My boyfriend was a little bit confused, so he kind of stood there for a few seconds when the man acknowledged him, looked at him, and then looked away, returning to his conversation with me. Again, in a friendly manner. So my boyfriend just left. This happened right during the time I was getting dressed in my bedroom, and I was terrified, and up to this day, I'm just puzzled. It still gives me the creeps. I used to hang out with the ghost of a girl when I was a kid. Not a fiction story. When I was around 3 or 4 years old, circa 2004 or 2005 at most, I lived in a house with my mom, and I don't have any brothers or sisters, so I always wanted one to play with because I felt lonely sometimes. So I remember that some days I used to play in between a wall and the door of my bedroom with a little girl. You know, when you open the door slightly and an angle is formed between the door and the wall. I always thought that it was my imaginary friend, because I'd often hear about them in movies and TV shows. I remember my mom asking about my imaginary friend, and I told her that she had her face covered in some sort of mud or dirt. I could only see her eyes. I told my mom that she was my neighbor, but that she had fallen in the street, and that's why her face was like that. I still remember her face so vividly to this day, and I'm 22 at the moment. I remember that some days my mom used to have people with her in her house, and they'd often stay at the living room talking about stuff. My mom always told me to stay in her bedroom until they were gone. Some other strange things that happened in that time period were that my mom would often visit the grave of a friend of hers that had recently passed away at the time. She would often cry a lot at this grave, saying things like, "Take me with you and I can't do this anymore," and stuff like that. I never thought about it because I was so little and I didn't understand much about what was going on at the time. Fast forward a couple of years. 2015 or 2016. My mom was getting married, and the photographer of the wedding was a friend of hers. I'm going to call the photographer Laura. So before the photo session, we went to Laura's house and they started talking about random stuff. And then something pops out of me. Laura asked my mom if our house was still haunted, and something clicked with me, and I started asking questions to both my mom and Laura. Laura told me that one time she went to our house, but there was nobody there. And because of that, she wrote something in a post-it note, or on a post-it note, and stick it on our front door. But when she was doing so, she saw the curtains started to move, as if somebody had sticked his head to look outside. Stuck. She found that quite strange and asked my mom about it, and my mom told her the story about what was going on. I started questioning my mom about what happened at that time, and she told me the whole story. My mom's side of the story. Apparently, in 2004 or 2005, my mom used to work in the same place with a neighbor, a girl about the same age as my mom. I'm going to call her Abigail. They were never friends, but they got along fine. Abigail's mom used to sell paintings, and my mom asked to buy one that had a couple of angels and Bible verse. It's worth mentioning that I don't remember this painting at all, by the way. So when my mom got the painting stuff, and, well, strange things started happening in our home, and she would often see a woman and a little girl. She always was in a bad mood, and sometimes her house would start to freeze in some rooms. Where we lived, the average temperature is around 104 in the summer, so my mom started looking for help and called a church group to pray in her home. The group, of quote-unquote friends that I mentioned earlier. But she didn't see any improvements in the situation, so she and my grandma went to see some sort of medium or witch. Really don't know what this lady was. My mom started talking about what was happening in her house at the time. She would often be on a pretty bad mood, and she would often visit her friend's grave and cry for help. The medium told my mom that when she went to visit her friend's grave, she wasn't asking for her friend. She was speaking to something or someone else, and then the medium said that her house had some spirits that came from something inside her home. She asked if my mom was given some present or if she bought something or maybe brought something. And everything started to happen, and if she knew somebody that could be jealous about my mom's life. We didn't have much money or anything crazy. My mom told her about the story of the painting in Abigail, and the medium told her to burn the painting because it could be what was causing everything. So my mom called her brothers and tried to burn the painting, but didn't catch fire at all. My mom went back to the medium some days later. The medium helped her burn the painting, but the medium told my mom that she had to make sure nothing wrong happened to Abigail, because every bad thing that the painting had would come back to Abigail, but if something happened to Abigail, my mom would keep the bad stuff on her. After that, everything came back to normal, and we moved cities and started using the house as a storage unit to keep our old furniture and boxes there. But one day I went back to my old city, just to visit some family. I was staying at my grandparents' house, but there was a thunderstorm that cut the entire block's electricity off. So we had the idea to go to my childhood home and stay there for the night. I went to my old house and tried to unlock the front door with no success. I tried unlocking the back door with no success either. My grandma told me to leave, and the house didn't want us there that night. My experience in Monterrey, Mexico. Through my younger years, 7 to 12, my mother dated a guy very on and off, which I think mostly had to do with him being in the Army and staying with his family in Laredo, Texas whenever he was home. Either way, he invited us to visit his cousin's summer cabin in Monterrey, Mexico for the weekend, so we did. The cabin was very ranch style, longer in one dimension and shorter than the other, so it was built like an architectural rectangle. On one far side of the building, think of this as like an aerial view, it was the kitchen. Next to that was the living room. Attached to the living room was a long, slender hallway connected to bedrooms on each side and a bathroom on one of the sides. The quote-unquote backyard was only accessible through the living room. That's by a sliding door. And what started as a bit of the desert floor met a forest's tree line of dead and dying Monterey cypress trees. Meeting the tree line was an elevated hunting tower, which had its platform meeting the top of the vertical tree line. I'm prefacing my experience with the following information, because I believe in being open-minded in every aspect, and want to tell my story rather than sell my story. On our way to the cabin, my mom's boyfriend was telling us about a cursed legend of the witches of Monterey. Apparently, they'd been haunting the mountainous area for generations, and were his childhood version of La Llorona. Clearly, he's trying to scare us from the get-go, and me being so young, I was eating this shit up like candy. We got to the cabin late evening. We decided to stay in for the night and watch watch M. Night Shyamalan's The Lady in the Water. After the movie, my mom's boyfriend asked me to go get something from the bedroom for him, and I was halfway down the hallway and he turned the lights off on me. And let me remind you, this is a very rural part of Mexico. So the dark was dark, with all the scary stories and, well, at the time for me, scary movie. I was spooked and I was frozen. My mom's boyfriend began to make your stereotypical ghost noises and taunted me to go deeper into the dark hallway. But I was so petrified, I remember just standing there frozen in fear. Longer story short, my mother got on him and turned the lights back on, and they comforted me. And after a few apologies, we all went to bed, and Can't remember how I slept that night, but honestly wish I did. The next day we did pretty basic tourist shit. Went to a bazaar, embraced the city's beautiful mountain range, which seemed to hug the city, ate authentic Mexican food, and visited the main hub of the city. When all that was all done, we decided to call it. Went back to the cabin. And this is important to me because I remember the night before so vividly, and I can't remember anything else about this night, other than what I'm going to write about. I was in the living room of the cabin. I remembered my mom's boyfriend was there with me. He asked if I wanted to go up into the hunting tower out back with him, and I innocently said yeah. I remember following him through the back door of the living room, and I remember him walking ahead and turning back to wave me towards him. I take it as he was trying to help me keep up with him and follow him. I watched him climb the ladder of the hunting tower, and I heard a voice behind me. "Hey, where are you going?" It was my mom's boyfriend behind me asking where I was going. I turned back around to look at the hunting tower along the tree line, and no one was there. Nothing was. Not an animal, not my mother, not her, but nothing. Fast forward to a few years ago. My now wife and I were still dating at the time and sharing ghost experiences with each other. Yes, I do have one other ghost experience in my life that I believe to be genuine as well. I told her about this experience, and Monterey, and I'll never forget the pale look on her face when I told her. And she's from a Mexican family as well, and this legend of the witches of Monterey is a very real thing for her as well. The scary part, as I was telling her this story on a Friday, according to what her family told her growing up, Friday is a forbidden day to talk about them. That's because it's one day of the week that they're most powerful. Apparently, they never forget their prey, and use that day as a lure towards what was lost. Initially, I thought bullshit, but I can't begin to express how many Fridays my wife had to stop me because I had randomly brought the story up on a Friday. Maybe it was self-conscious. I don't know. A visitor to my cabin in the woods. I live in rural Appalachia and adore the wilderness. I often invite friends to come out and camp with me. One, because I enjoy sharing the wilderness with people close to me, and two, because there's a creature that lives in my woods as mentioned in a previous post. A couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5, my aunt bought a small cabin from the Amish and placed it here. She intended it to be used as a playhouse for my younger cousins, but my cousins never enjoyed it and could never really stay a full night there. The weekend off of school came around, and I called my friend to see if he'd like to stay in the woods for the weekend. He agreed, and he had his mom bring him out. We started walking and made it not even halfway to our destination when he asked if he could just stay in the new cabin for a night or two because the weather said it was going to have a storm anyways. We walked back to the top of a hill so I could text my aunts, and she gave me the okay. It was starting to get dark, or rather it was starting to get dark, so I went ahead and settled down completely in the cabin, started eating what we were supposed to be like camping rations. We talked and talked for hours until we looked out the window and noticed it was dark out and the rain was coming down. We decided it was best to lay down and go to sleep, and he passed out almost instantly, leaving me alone in pitch-black darkness listening to the sound of heavy rain hitting the tin roof. I didn't even realize I fell asleep till I heard loud knocking and rattling on the door. Figured my buddy went out to pee or something. The door had a large window, and I could clearly see somebody standing there. I was dreading having to crawl out of the blankets into the slightly moist, cold, still-aired room to let him in after he somehow locked himself out. So I rolled over to prepare to stand up, and as I was faced to his bed, which I couldn't make out the shape 100%, but as I focused my eyes more, I could see he was still in it. I froze and was in pure terror for what seemed like at least an hour when I hear the thing at the door make a sound akin to clearing its throat, then run into the woods. I waited at least 20 minutes before asking if my friend was awake, and he immediately said, "Yeah, did you see and hear that thing too?" And I said, "Yeah." Were you awake when it was whispering? No, I said. I laid there too scared to move or make a sound above a whisper for hours. I'd start drifting off and almost immediately start hearing something tap on the windows, but I'd try my best to ignore it even if I could clearly hear something rubbing its fingers on the edge of the tin roof on my side of the cabin. Morning came and I felt like death. My buddy didn't feel as bad and apparently thought the figure was a dream, but quickly realized there wasn't any more details. I'm a believer, and I didn't have a choice. I've seen a ghost only once. It was so real that I could really believe it without any effort. There were physical effects to the incident. I could have no doubt. I decided to work overnight at the club, where I'm a maintenance man. I was alone in the place, so it was pretty nice at first. I hijacked the sound system and I played my own music while I worked, and for a while everything was normal. I decided to go and check on the boiler in the mezzanine. This is where the night changed. This mezzanine floor had been problematic since I started there about a year and a half prior. The lights would flicker and the pumps ran roughly, and the power from the breaker box would drop and go back to normal in quick intervals. It happened so quickly that the pump never shut off, but when I measured power with my multimeter, I could see it dip and come back up again, causing the display on my meter to fluctuate rapidly. I'd called an electrician about the first 6 months in on the job, and he had looked over to everything in the mezzanine floor. The answer seemed obvious. The breaker box was from the 1960s and was so old that it wasn't working properly. He recommended changing it for a new one. The board of directors scoffed at the price, so he operated with the old box for another year. This night, I was in the same mezzanine, and the lights were flickering as usual, and it got chilly. The lights began to flicker more rapidly. After about 30 seconds, it began flashing like a strobe light. I stood in the doorway, beginning to feel a little bit afraid of the light bulbs exploding. I looked at the one closest to me, and then I noticed him out of the corner of my eye. I was not alone in the room. There was a man standing in the corner looking at me. I was so scared that I turned very slowly to look at him. And in the strobing light, my eyes moved closer to his position. I was too scared to move them any more quickly. I can see very well in my peripheral vision, well enough to read sometimes. Me too. I saw a man in a navy blue shirt and pants staring at me with his teeth bared. It looked as if he had been horribly burned and his eyelids and lips were gone. He was about 5 feet and 7 inches tall. Slowly, still my eyes moved toward him until it rested on the spot that he'd been standing, but he was gone. I called out into the room scared, trying to remain brave. "Dude, you're dead," I said. "You're not supposed to be here." The strobe effect of the lights became more intense. "Whatever place has been calling to you, that pull you feel, you have to go there. There's nothing left for you here, you're dead." I tried to feel love for the unfortunate soul, and suddenly the flashing stopped. The mezzanine went back to normal, better than I had ever seen it. The lights stopped flickering altogether, and the pumps were purring like they'd never done before. The power from the breaker box has been consistent ever since. I don't think I need any more proof of the afterlife if that's how it's going to present itself. Once was enough for me. The ghost outside my bedroom door. It was 1998, and my mom, 36, had bought her first home. Her being a single mom, this was huge. 4-bedroom, 1-bath house with a family room and a pool in the back. The house was big and lots of rooms for me, I was 8, and my brother, 6, to play in. My mom said since she was a child she would see demons, and because of her gift she was used by her church to point where the spirits were. She said I would see them when I was 4, but that I don't remember that. My mom just told me I would react to them, and I do feel and hear them. Since we moved to this house, I felt a tall, dark figure in front of my bedroom door. He would never dare to come in, but he would walk around the kitchen that was right in front of my room. I was never a person to close my bedroom door because I always felt him there. Because of it, I slept with a nightlight to feel safe. If the light went off, I'd feel dread and paralyzed and would sweat profusely till my mom came to help me or bring a candle. Multiple times I'd take out the courage and tell him to leave, and he did, and I was able to sleep then. A lot more weird things happened in the house. My mom had to talk to her pastor. When the pastor came, he told us the spirits were using our home as a bridge between our neighbors that would summon them, and there was nothing he could do. So we just had to accept that we had visitors and learn to live with that. Which some months I felt calm and some I felt pure dread staying in my room, and I had to live with that. He was every night there and only left when I told him to. And at 21 years old, I got a new dog. She would sleep with me and she made me feel even safer. When I felt him, she'd bark at the door. First time she didn't know, and I was not crazy, that it was never only in my head. My dog gave me more courage to tell him to go away, and he did. Well, that was simple. So I was able to sleep better than I did as a child, and my dog would also bark at the same area even during the day, and at 22 I moved out and had my first child. My mom, being awesome, let us stay with her for 3 months to adjust to our new life as new parents and learn from her. The first night I slept in my mom's room with my son. My partner slept in my room where there was only a sofa. Next morning he was scared and with pure panic in his eyes. He said he'd heard a noise that woke up and saw the door of my room open, and a tall, dark figure came closer and closer to him. He wasn't able to move or speak, and I always told him about the figure in front of my room, but he would always brush it off as me being a paranoid person. That day, he learned I wasn't lying. Years later, my mom sold the house to a lovely couple with a toddler and a baby on the way. But we then heard the news that they stopped living in it and then sold it again. Now it's being put up for rent and nobody wants it. I always ask my mom if it's because the spirits that walk around it. New build. Around 2008 and 2009, when I was 13 or 14, I had just started a new habit of staying up very late. I'd sit in my room with the clock radio playing some tunes while I sat in bed doodling all night. Can't pinpoint exactly when it started, but one of those nights my radio just began making this jacked up noise, like a distorted, terrible noise over the faint sound of music struggling to be heard. I immediately hated it, but changing the station did nothing. This went on for a few minutes and just stopped. I quickly shrugged it off. Then it kept happening. Every night, for a few minutes, the radio would go nuts. If I wasn't being lazy, I'd get up and turn it down for a while. Most nights, regardless of how much it bothered me, I'd usually just suffer through it. And it occurred to me that it seemed to always happen around the same time, so curiously, I paid attention one evening at 3:30 exactly. On this little clock, it started, and it didn't stop until the turn of 3:34. So for a solid 3 minutes, it would just go on. I was aware there was some sort of significance to 3 a.m., and I wasn't the type of person to believe in that kind of thing, but still, it made me feel really uneasy. It felt so intentional, so I paid attention more nights. Every single night, 3:30 to 3:34 would happen. I tried telling my family. Nobody believed me or bothered to listen to my off-putting rants. You know how in horror movies the adults never listen to the kids blatantly calling things out? Ever thought that was unrealistic? Well, it isn't. Everyone else in my house was asleep by 3, till finally, One night my older brother and his best friend were awake long enough for me to convince one of them, the friend, to please come check this out. He acknowledged the strange sound and literally said, "I'm not fucking with that," and left. I started just turning the radio off and hanging out in the game room, but every time 3:30 rolled around, I was on edge. One night, once again alone, I was sitting at the desktop computer, trolling or whatever. That's when I hear what sounded like an avalanche falling in my kitchen right below me. The game room was upstairs and overlooked the living room, which connected into the kitchen. It was a completely open space. I heard what I assumed was every pot and pan in our kitchen simultaneously falling out of the cabinets. My first assumption was our cat was up to no good and knocked something over. But as I descended down the stairs in the pitch-black abyss on the ground floor, I thought, what if someone's breaking in? I run to switch on the light, but nothing. No cat, no pans, no mess. Everything's perfectly fine. I was so confused I even looked around to make sure, but I had zero explanation, and I knew for a fact the kitchen was the source of this noise. The last minor thing I can recall was an incident where I was on the phone with my best friend, and mid-call the phone went absolutely nuts. The call cut out and just screeched and gargled, and can't quite describe it, but I've never stared at something in pure terror like that before. It was a landline, and it's not like something similar hasn't occurred before, but this was different and awful. I didn't even call her back. I just left, walked down the street to her house, and said, "Fuck this shit." Finally, the kitchen again. It's a Saturday evening. The previously mentioned best friend was over at my place. My mom was on a date, and it's probably important to mention that my dad had died in 2007. It's around 7 or 8, and we're making snacks, and we hear my mom's car pull up. Keep in mind, we've been hanging out in the kitchen for at least 20 minutes, and we had slightly tan tile. We go to meet them at the door. We're all heading to the kitchen, my best friend and I, highly anticipating the leftovers we were about to steal. And upon entering the kitchen, we all noticed spots of blood on the floor. 20 or so nickel-sized spots of blood sporadically on the ground, all contained around the general area in front of the stove. My mom, being a mom, says, "Check your feet. It looks like one of you are bleeding." My friend was still in her socks, no blood. I check my feet, perfectly unbothered. My mom looks for the cat, and it's asleep in the couch. Probably hadn't moved in hours. We couldn't find the source. We even looked up at the ceiling just in case. My mom's boyfriend wiped some up on a paper towel and sniffed it. "This is definitely blood," he said. Mom just cleaned it up, and she even made some remark about how we were probably just trying to scare them. And to this day, my friend, who we're still very close, brings it up like, "Yo, you remember that time when there was all that blood all over the kitchen? Like, seriously, what the fuck was that? Your house was haunted, dude." On top of these things, I just felt awful. I was already depressed and dead dad and shit, and I started having terribly vivid nightmares almost every night. I now know I have a sleep disorder, and I think these were the first instances of it developing, but that's kind of irrelevant here. I no longer slept in my bed. I created a sort of safe haven in my closet. After everybody went to bed for the night, I was always on edge. Another night of me snuggled up in my closet, I'm listening to my radio, and time somehow escaped me. The radio did its thing, and I was done. I felt terrorized and targeted and afraid. I just started crying, and I hated it. Whatever it was, I just absolutely despised it. I begged it to stop, and I can't remember exactly what I said, but it was along the lines of, stop, please stop, for fuck's sake, leave me alone, please." And it did. 3:32, I'll never forget. Radio went back to singing clearly. If anything strange happened after that, and I didn't even bother noticing. A while later, when my mom was in her messier stage of grieving, after distracting herself with dating and working failed, she was drinking herself to death on the couch again and brought up the blood in the kitchen to me. "You remember when we saw that blood in the kitchen? You know what it reminded me of? Your dad. When he was almost gone and the diabetes was taking him, his feet would split and bleed, and I'd have to clean up the little spots of blood he'd leave behind. What a terrible time for us. How I Met the Demon Who Watched Me Sleep. When I was a kid, about 6 or 7, I experienced some kind of entity. I was with my best friend. Based on what I know now as an adult, I'm pretty sure it was a demon. My first experience with it was when I went to my friend's house for a playdate. When I got to her house, I went to her bedroom to look for her. The light in the room was off, but the one in the closet was on. So I looked there, and that's where she was. She was sitting on the ground talking as though she was playing pretend. I asked her what she was playing, in which she responded that she wasn't playing at all, but rather talking to another person in the closet. I remember she had a Barbie poster in her closet, so I asked if that's who she was pretending to talk to. She got kind of annoyed and said no again, and then we got up and walked out of the closet, turned around and asked me why I was in there. It was like she didn't know of anything that had just happened. And this was strange behavior for her, because she's, well, at least usually, extremely sweet. More thoughtful and caring than the average kid our age. She wasn't one to lie or try to hurt others' feelings. The next time we encountered something was when we were in her playroom. There was a bunk bed in there, and we would just in there, and we would a fort by hanging a blanket around the bottom bunk. Alrighty then. We'd also turn the lights off to create atmosphere for a game of dolls and whatever we were playing. The door of the room was closed and not locked, and we're sitting there playing, and I happened to look up and see the shadow of a person move between the crack of the hung blanket behind my friend. I thought her mom had come into the room to talk to us. I told my friend, and she got this scared look on her face and asked me to turn on the light. So I got up to turn it on, and I noticed her mom wasn't in the room like I thought. My kid brain didn't think ghosts, but also didn't think anything of it at all. I flicked on the light as my friend watched from her fort, and as soon as I did, the doorknob next to me started turning back and forth, completely one way, then completely the other. And it was turning quickly and loudly, like somebody was playing with it. And if they wanted to push it open, they could, and the door was unlocked after all. I remember waiting there for a minute, just watching it in confusion and wondering if maybe her mom wanted to do this instead of knocking on the door for permission to come in. So I grabbed the knob while it was still going and pulled it open. And of course, I'm sure you can gather that there's no one on the other side. Went to the hall closet nearby to see if somebody had hidden in there. Maybe one of my friend's siblings. My friend ran out of the room while I did that and sat down the L-shaped hallway to her mom. I went after her, and I listened to her explain to her mom what had happened, and I added that it was true, and she wasn't pretending. Her mom chalked it up to us being kids and making it up. And we also checked, and neither of her siblings were home that day. This was the last experience I vividly remember, but not the end of the story. A couple of years after it happened, my family moved away. I lost touch with my friend. We never talked about the incident. Half because she didn't want to, and half because other things really took precedent in my kid brain, I guess. Fast forward about 17-ish years. My friend and I are adults now. She moves out of the town I live in. We agreed to meet in Cat. I'm pretty forward, so I didn't wait long to ask her about the things that happened. Through the years, I realized more and more how wild the experience was and told friends and family about it. I also looked up things like the doorknob thing moving. Never found any explanation. But anyways, my friend answered my question with a simple, "Yeah, I remember that. I was actually going to bring it up because there was a part of it that you didn't know, but I wasn't sure if you'd be too scared to hear it." Well, I insisted that I was fine. She told me that when we'd have a sleepover at her house, she woke up in the middle of the night every time and saw a shadowy woman with deep red eyes and something on her head, either a hat or a large bun hairstyle. She never ran to get her parents or screamed, and she still doesn't know why. She says she just pulled the blanket just over. Falling over myself. She says she just put the blanket over her head and tried to fall back to sleep. She said that when I moved away, the lady stopped showing up. When her brother moved out to go to college, she took over his room in the basement, and she uncovered a Ouija board in his closet while clearing out his old things, so she suspects that this is what caused the activity. I think she was worried the lady had attached to me and followed me out of the state. Luckily, I'd never had an experience as intense as that one ever again. And I sometimes experienced waking up in the middle of the night and being touched or seeing shadows. Not sleep paralysis, because I could still move during these times, but definitely something I chalked up to me being half asleep and possibly still dreaming a little bit. Preschool teacher's story. Anyways, I'm a preschool teacher, and kids are weird. And we all know that they're in tuned with the paranormal, right? Right. So this was my first year working in preschool as an assistant teacher. And that part really doesn't matter, to be honest. So there's this one little girl that just starts out, and she's 3 years old. She doesn't get along with the other kids as well, but she talks to me a lot. She goes on and on about this other kid, presumably a sibling or something. She talks about how they spend time together and play games, go to the park, and I'm like, wow, what a cute sibling relationship. The name of this other kid is obviously a real name and something a 3-year-old wouldn't come up with. So one day, Dad picks up and I'm making small talk, and I say, when am I going to meet insert name of presumed sibling here? Student talks about her all the time. Dad gets quiet like he knows but wants to pretend like he doesn't, and then he's like, who? And I say, oh, I thought you had a sibling. Insert probable demon's name here. She talks about her and all the fun stuff they do all the time, and he's like, no, she doesn't have siblings. So then he doesn't say anything else, and it's awkward, and he leaves with his kid quickly. The next day, I'm all curious, so I ask the kid while she's doing an art project, and I'm like, so who is insert name of satanic creature here? And she dead-ass stops what she's doing, goes blank-faced, looks at me with the most dead eyes I've seen a 3-year-old give, and say, she's the girl who watches me sleep through my window at night. When I tell you I shit my pants, I asked her to draw a picture. I don't know if you know this, but 3-year-olds are ass at drawing pictures. So it was just a circle person with a stick legs, an arm, and a triangle bow on its head. But that isn't all. I actually babysat this kid a few times, and her bedroom was on the 2nd floor of their house. There wasn't a tree there for anybody to climb up or anything. I asked her if so-and-so still watching her sleep, and she was like, no, Mommy and Daddy went to church, and insert her special friend's name here, stopped coming over to play with me. If you're interested in hearing more scary things I've heard from preschoolers, then let me know, because I have way more than this. During COVID, the preschool where I worked stayed open, but it was a small place with only 2 classrooms and a lot of kids that didn't really come at that time. Ended up being me and one kid a lot of these days. So one evening, we're sitting on the floor playing, and I say something to her with the doll I have and whatever, and the kid doesn't answer. I look up at her, and she's not looking at me or at the dolls at all. She's looking over my shoulder, just blank-faced. My first instinct was to say her name. She didn't respond right away, and there's a little spot of silence. When she did, she looked me in the eye and said, your mommy's hugging you right now and wants to tell you she misses you. My first thought upon hearing that was to check on my mom because I was terrified. So I texted her asking if she was okay. I got a response right away, and she was. So I was like, okay, whatever. Tried not to think about it again. Keep playing, and a few minutes pass, and then the kid stops and says, Miss Y, why does your mommy look like that? I reminded her that she's seen my mom before when she picked me up one day because my car wasn't working, and she goes, "Oh, I have seen your mommy. That wasn't your mommy then." I asked her who it was. She said she didn't know, and I really didn't want to ask any more because sometimes I worry that the kids will tell their parents our conversations and then the parents will think I'm crazy like a ghost enthusiast, teaching their kids scary shit. Also, this kid never said anything like this before or after. Super random for her. Out-of-the-body experience. I feel like floating. The best way to describe it is like being under the water and somehow still connected to my body. I do not see myself in bed. It's just like a feeling, and I know it's not a dream. It was scary at first, but it actually started to feel relaxing now. First time that this has happened, it didn't last long because I panicked and woke up, and I thought it was a dream back then, but it keeps happening and it's evolving. Now, besides this floating feeling, I also feel like I'm being dragged. I feel like something is dragging me. It's hard to describe. I can feel pressure, as if my body's in contact with the surface while dragged, and then at one point I feel like I'm being absorbed. Like last week, something a little bit different happened. I remember thinking, okay, seems like I'm floating again. And once more, I feel like I'm floating and feeling the pressure, just like always. This time, it's like I'm trapped in some sort of circuit where the starting point is my own body and everything's white. No walls, just a white emptiness. After a while, I noticed a bed, and it's a small bed. It's all white, and there's an old man lying down. First time, just notice him. Gives me the vibe that he's sleeping, and I just look at him and keep being dragged around. Another round, and I'm back at the same spot, and I somehow stop. The old man is sitting now, and I ask him what he's doing in there. He says that he can't tell me. Well, I ask who he is. He said he can't tell me. It's like we're having a conversation without talking, and we can somehow communicate, but no word is exchanged. He starts to get out of bed, and I get really scared. He didn't seem to want to attack me or anything like that, but his appearance was scary. Can't remember completely, but he was mostly bald and had some long white strands of hair in the back of his head. And I kind of wake up after that. Told my husband, and he doesn't believe me. He thinks that I'm dreaming, but I know that I'm not. Has anyone experienced something like this before? Not even sure if it's called an out-of-the-body experience. I Googled it, and out-of-the-body experience is more associated with near-death experience, which isn't the case. But I don't know how to describe what's happening to me. First time I've seen the article "the" inserted into that phrase, but I like it. Out-of-the-body experience. See ya.